So to start us off, I'd like to introduce John, our General Manager, to begin us with a karakia.
Kia ora, Izzy. I'll just kick us off with a really quick karakia for the day. Unihia te pō, whirimarama, tomokia te au, te ao whatu tangata, tātai ki runga, tātai ki raro, tātai te ki ahara, ahongi e, hui e, tāi ki e. From confusion and darkness comes the light of understanding. From our understanding comes unity as people. We are joined, the above, the below, with what binds us, are allied together as one. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thanks so much, JP. Kia ora, everyone. I'm Izzy Robinson. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the creative producer here at Touch Compass. Today I'm wearing a light gray button-up shirt, white framed glasses, and my long brown curly hair is tied up in a bun behind my large black headphones. Behind me is a video background of a white wall with the Touch Compass logo in my upper left. Welcome to all of you to our final, sadly, our final in our International Creative Leadership Series. Just some technical housekeeping before we begin. First of all, during the webinar itself, if you could please mute your microphone, that would be great. However, in terms of your video, if you want that on or off, totally up to you. It's a very relaxed webinar, so eat, drink, come, go as you need, whatever you'd prefer. If your screen is just a whole series of names and you want to hide them, you can either click in the top right corner where the 3 dots are and go hide non-video participants, or you can select speaker view. That way it will just center the speakers and the NZSL interpreter. We have from Platform Interpreting 2 amazing New Zealand Sign Language interpreters who will be with us for the entire webinar. They'll be interrupting every now and then to swap over. So when that happens, we'll just take a pause and swap between. When we get to the end of our webinar for the Q&A section, please feel free to turn your cameras back on, unmute yourselves, come on into the conversation. Jeremy and the ADP will be moderating the live conversation. So if you've got a question, raise your hand. There's the hand raise icon function at the bottom, or you can pop it in the chat. I'll be reading any questions in the chat aloud, and I'll be checking the chat throughout the webinar. Zan will also be checking the chat on the Facebook live streaming. So if you're on Facebook, you got any questions, pop them in there and they'll get through to us. If you have any questions at all during the webinar, if they're technical or if they're directly for Jeremy or anyone else, just send them along to in the chat, anonymously or not, and we'll make sure they get answered or fixed as soon as we can. So without any further ado, I will introduce one of our artistic direction panel, Suzanne, to start us off.
Kia ora, my name's Suzanne Cowan. I'm delighted to be here today with Jeremy Smith. Welcome, Jeremy. And just a little bit about myself. So I am seated here today on my couch in my apartment in Greylin, Auckland, and I am of European descent, Irish, Scottish, and English. And also when we're talking about sort of cultural heritage, I also want to mention in the mix is that, so I started my life as a so-called non-disabled person, and then I transitioned to becoming a person who identifies with a disability about 30 years ago. So I feel like that's very much part of my cultural heritage as well. I am wearing a black and white and gold sleeveless dress, a summer dress, as it's very hot and humid today here. And behind me is an Aboriginal lithograph by an artist called Bandit Marika, and a couple of furry rugs. And I would like to, and also my hair is kind of light brown and it's tied back in a bun today. And I would like to pass you over to Rodney Bell.
Kia ora, Suzanne. Tēnā tātou katoa. Nau mai, hana mai. Welcome everybody to our hui today. First and foremost, thank you JT for cloaking us with karakia as we honour our First Nations people of Aotearoa, our tangata Māori. Jeremy, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koe, a wholehearted greetings to you, my friend, and thank you for being part of us cuz today, and really honoured to be sharing your story in your life with us today. Thank you, Jeremy. Nō reira, mō taki ora te maunga, mga okawa te awa, tainui te waka, nā te maniapoto te iwi, nā te rora te hapu. So I belong to the mountain of Mōtaki Ora. I feel I belong to the river of Manga Okiwa. I descend from the Tainui waka here. And my primary tribe was Ngāti Maniapoto, my sub-tribe was Ngāti Rora. I also honour my English and my Scottish toto that runs through my body. And yeah, as Suzanne said, a part of my culture is my disability too. I acquired my disability 30 years ago. I sit here in homage and an honour, and as part of an amazing Hautupua community, an extraordinary disabled community. What burns my mother fire is the sacrifices my ancestors went through. And with that said, I'd like to pay respects to Te Pāpaka Māui, to Australia, to you, Jeremy, and the ground you sit on, and just paying homage to the First Nations people there. Nō reira, tēnā tata katoa. Thank you very much. Now passing you to the best side of to the sparkling queen side of our artistic direction panel, Lucy Whaiva. Tēnā koe, Lucy.
Te lofa lava, e hia hi pei, tina kautau katoa. Greetings to you all. I am Lucy Faber. I am a Pacific performer with cerebral palsy, and I've got some different verbal abilities to communicate with people, with the communication application. I am a light brown skin with black hair. I'm wearing a light silk shirt with black shaped patterns. I am Samoan with European descent. I've been performing for over 25 years and Turedi with Touch Compass. I went overseas to get further training in dance and contact improvisation workshops. Last year I started to work independently as a collaborator.
Kia ora, Lucy. Now, Jeremy, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koe. You share your life with us, my friend.
Thank you so much, Rodney. Kaya, everyone, as we say here on the land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I pay my respects to our elders, past and present, and thank First People from Australia within my life for teaching me the importance of the country that my 2 feet are connected to each and every day, and how to treat this land and country with respect and honour it, and never take for granted those that have walked before me. My name is Jeremy Smith. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a Caucasian male. I have shaved head with brown hair. I'm with a beard. I'm wearing blue glasses and a black t-shirt with a necklace. To my right behind me is a bookshelf. I'm sitting in my study here in Boorloo, which is also known as Perth. Not that you can tell on the screen, but I am a man with achondroplasia or dwarfism. I've been identifying as disabled for the last 5 years, since the age of 39. Prior to that, that wasn't really part of my identity, but I'm now regretting having not been part of this community and embracing this part of my life until so late in my life. So I'm really honoured to have been asked to be part of this conversation series. Thank you, Touch Compass, and thank you everyone for having me. I'm looking forward to having a great conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Just wondering to start off with, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about your artistic journey.
Yes.
And how you come here today with all your talents as a creative leader in this industry.
Thank you, of course. So I'm almost 45. I'll be 45 next month in January. So I have been born and raised here in Boorloo on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. So I've spent various periods in other parts of Australia and overseas, which I'll talk about. But so I went to school here and developed a real keen interest in the arts and humanities all through high school. I was accepted into the Western Australian Academy of Performing Arts, otherwise known as WAPA, and I studied lighting design there. I guess that was the beginning of my professional career as a lighting designer on a freelance basis here in Perth. I worked with many main stage companies and did a lot of independent and experimental work as well around town in smaller venues and in non-theatrical venues, which was really exciting to work with some of our brave and audacious independent artists here in Perth at that era. This is like the late 90s at this stage. Around that time, I chose freelance life became clear it wasn't for me. So I wanted to sort of pursue opportunities that would give me more full-time work. So I started looking for on-the-job opportunities to skill up as a stage manager and production manager. And so I got my first job in that space with the Perth Festival back in 1998, I think it was, as the assistant technical coordinator. And from there started going into roles, including as a stage manager, lighting designer and performer with Barking Gecko Theatre Company here in Perth. And then eventually that led me to become the production manager of the Awesome Children's Festival, which is an annual international arts festival for children and young people. The festival director of Awesome at that stage was a man called Gary Chard, and he encouraged me to apply for an emerging artist fellowship that was available here through the West Australian government through what was then called Arts WA, which is essentially our equivalent here in WA of Creative New Zealand. I was successful, so I got a professional development fellowship to enable me to go to Vancouver and work with the Vancouver International Children's Festival, to start working as, I guess, transitioning from a technical person to a producer and arts manager. And I can't underestimate how transformative that was in terms of the impact on my career. I certainly wouldn't have been where I am now without that fellowship. And so that's one thing, whenever there's a fellowship, throw your hats in the ring and go for it, because that time and space and support for an extended period can be really transformative, I found at that point of my career. And I think indeed at any point of anyone's career to have that ongoing support. So when I came back, I sort of...
temperatures now, please, Jeremy. Sorry to interrupt. Okay, we're good to go.
Thank you. When I came back, I started working more as a creative producer with Awesome, developing a program for children and young people in regional and remote communities around Western Australia, which was really working with those communities to enable the kids to self-determine what their communities meant to them, and then present local celebrations in the form of mini festivals in those communities, and then showcase elements of those works at the annual Awesome Festival in Perth. So it was the beginning of where I sort of really started working in what we call community arts and cultural development, and began a long sort of relationship I have had with regional and remote Australia as well. Then I sort of spent a period working in arts funding. So I worked in Arts WA as the Community and Regional Arts Development Officer, which was really interesting as well to sort of be on that side of the grant making process and be the one that sort of helps and supports artists and communities and organisations to secure funding. I then went back out into the sector and worked with Dada, who would be familiar with some of you, which is an arts and disability organisation here in Perth. I worked as their regional arts and health officer, manager. I worked with communities in our far northwest of Western Australia, in the Kimberley region, and right down to the southwest, doing projects that spanned disabled artists with neurodiverse artists and arts and health activities as well in a whole raft of different settings and environments. Then I went to work for the Australia Council. I was already on the Community Partnerships Committee at that stage, and spent 4 years in the Australia Council as the head of experimental art and community art, which was a really incredible portfolio to be part of at that time. It's sort of the part where I feel a lot of the most interesting artistic practice happens. And I did a lot of work around council's support of disabled artists and artists in regional and remote Australia during that period as well. As the pandemic hit, I was lucky to secure a job back here in Perth as the general manager of PICA. So was there for about 18 months and then more recently in August this year, commenced as the senior producer at Performing Lines WA. And Performing Lines WA is part of a national organisation, and we exist to support independent artists to create, seed and produce and present main stage works in various forms, mainly in the performing arts. So really excited to be in this role now and working alongside artists to help realise new works and I think help sort of play a bit of a role in ensuring the work that we see represented on our stages is reflective of the community where we live. So that's sort of a long and meandering response to where I've been and what I'm doing. And I've got, as my bio said, I've got a couple of board engagements that I'm also part of now since I've returned to Perth, which are really exciting as well, with a great organisation called PVI Collective, which is a experimental arts and interdisciplinary arts organisation based here in Perth, and also the Chamber of Arts and Culture here in WA, which is a peak advocacy body to lobby for greater support and engagement within the arts and cultural sectors.
Awesome.
I feel like I'm just talking.
Great curriculum. Yeah. And Jeremy, what are you excited about at the moment?
I'm excited about my new role. Is really fantastic. It's very big. I'm still learning it, and there's a lot to learn. But I think Western Australia's been really fortunate in many ways in the way that we've managed our way through the pandemic, because it really, apart from an initial lockdown, obviously when COVID first hit back in 2020, apart from a few short lockdowns, we've been relatively untouched and unscathed and been able to return to normal life for quite a long period now, certainly since mid this year. And that has brought very interesting circumstances for our sector here, because I was saying before we jumped on this call live that it's provided immense opportunity for artists and arts workers and organisations and indeed communities in our state to have moments to present new work, because we just haven't been able to bring other work in. You know, there was a completely 100% local Perth Festival this year, which Performing Lines, the organisation that I now work at, was able to produce and present 4 new world premiere works by West Australian artists as part of. And there were a lot of other companies and artists that were able to have that moment to sort of be part of an international arts festival. That looks like it's going to happen again in 2022, certainly because of the border situation still here. But on the flip side of that, everyone's just completely exhausted because we've just been so focused on delivery and I guess the complexity, the added complexity and logistics of COVID on top of all of that. It just feels like you're in a constant state of react, respond, adapt, and having to, you know, throw plans out the window and recalibrate at a rate of speeds. But yeah, it's great. I'm very excited to be working alongside independent artists again. I missed that for the last year and a half when I was in a general manager role. So it's great to be back on the tools, as it was, doing something I love and feel very passionate about.
Awesome. And what's the disability art scene like in Perth?
Yeah, we've got, as I said, there's Dada, who are a very long-standing organisation that have been part of the community and fabric here for a very long time. And I used to work for them, obviously, as I said. So they've gone through a lot of change in recent years, where they've been able to acquire a fantastic new venue in Fremantle that they've turned into an amazing multi-art form venue. I'm keen, through my role at Performing Lines WA, to work with a lot more independent disabled artists and neurodiverse artists as well. So we're starting those conversations now to look at what that means of working collaboratively with artists, how we've done a lot of work before I joined the organisation, working with artists from culturally diverse backgrounds. But I think there's another way that we need to sort of learn and adapt to support the creation of work for, with and by disabled artists as well. And I think that's something I'm really looking forward to starting to pilot, I guess. You know, what is the additional support requirements that we need to do in the making process? What are the additional time elements that we need to factor into space? And I guess what that whole concept of self-determination is by disabled artists, be it learning disabled or you know, the artists that are physically disabled or whatnot. I guess how we sort of adapt and shift to create new exciting works within that context as well. Yeah, so I think, and there's a couple of other, I think there's a bit of a groundswell going on over here at the moment within that space. So I'm really excited to sort of hopefully be part of that, and hopefully we can support that move to its next stage.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Rodney.
Did I see Lucy had a question?
Yes.
What are the advantages? Oh, working behind the scenes, disadvantages, a lot more work. So the question that Lucy posed was, what are the advantages and disadvantages of being in a pandemic as you working behind the scenes, Jeremy? So like I said, I fled Sydney right on the eve of the start of the pandemic. And literally it was quite an extraordinary situation because when I got the job, COVID was probably a thing overseas at that stage. And I had to give 8 weeks notice in my previous job. And so that was the 8 weeks that everything started shutting down and locking down. And then eventually I had this plan to move over during the Easter weekend, and I got 72 hours notice that I had to bring all of that forward because the hard border was coming into effect in Western Australia. And so that was the beginning what COVID would mean to my working life. And then going into a general manager role at Pika at that time, having to navigate, you know, obviously all the impacts on employment and human resources, and then what it meant to run a multi-arts organisation in a building, because we at that stage were subject to different restrictions and guidelines for our gallery spaces versus our performance spaces. So very complex. And I guess it's just that one of the things which I guess has become more of an advantage now, I've become a lot less rigid in the way that I approach things, because you just have to be in this environment of the pandemic, I think, because, you know, you've got to learn to flex and adapt quickly and shapeshift and change to circumstances. And certainly that's something that I think a lot of us within the sector have now been able to add to our skill set as a result of what COVID and the pandemic has done. I think, you know, in terms of advantages as well, I think the fact that people now know that you don't always have to physically be together to enable creation and collaboration to happen. You know, I think that was always often personally, I love going in the routine of going into an office and being part of a, you know, and I really enjoy separating my home from my work. But I know other people are really pro being able to sort of, you know, do from home in the one space and collaborate and connect and whatnot, and completely love that that's the pandemic's sort of really enabled that, and that flexibility around working and that flexibility around how we collaborate and communicate. I do think that, you know, I think one thing that we should not lose out of the pandemic is that that slow time that we've been able to maybe have to be able to cook and generate new ideas and ways of working and collaborate. And I think that we shouldn't just go back to the whole quick go way of working before the pandemic. So I think that all goes down to, you know, a lot of conversation has been happening about what does touring look like now that after the pandemic, and, you know, a lot of talk has been about the fact that we need to it's not just fly in, fly out. It's a lot more about relationships and sort of building reciprocity and long-term mutually beneficial partnerships around that sort of work that previously we probably hadn't paid enough attention to. And so I think things like that can also be applied in a disability art space as well, in the way that we sort of collaborate and work together and create new work too. So I guess I'm hoping those are sorts of things that we can keep as legacies of positive legacies of what we've just been through over the last 2 years to 18 months. Yeah. Thank you, Lucy.
Hey, kia ora, Jeremy, it's Rodney again.
Hey, Rodney.
Yeah, Rodney that's sitting here with brown hair down to his shoulders and a grey shirt with black stripes running up and down, and sitting on the manual chair with my zippy zebra painted rainbow colours behind me, with a tickle tickle and a Māori tepa tepa. It's me again. But hey, Jeremy, what's your most exciting performance moment you've had in your career?
Oh God, as in that I've been part of, or
yeah, or yeah, just something that you really that you hold on to, either close to your heart or strong in your performance.
I was actually performed. I've never really actively pursued work as a performer. But there's been a couple of things that have been offered to me that have been too good to refuse early on in my career. One of them was a work in the year 2000 with Barking Gecko Theatre Company. They wanted to create a new work that was based on the creation myth. So how the moon, the earth, stars and sun were formed for the millennium, for the new millennium. And it was a non-verbal work so that it could tour internationally and be accessible to all audiences. So I got to play a character called Moon Michael, so essentially the man in the moon. And it was a very beautiful work. It was very movement focused, obviously being non-verbal, very sweet. It was staged on a vertical set. So it was behind it was a scaffolding tower which supported lots of ramps and swings and drops and whatnot that we, climbed all over during the actual performance. And it was just a really, really lovely work to be able to work. I mean, I'm obviously not a trained performer. I'm not an actor, and so I guess having the opportunity to be part of a work where I didn't need to learn lines and do all those sorts of things was really exciting and really, really lovely. We had a chance to tour the work to Singapore, which was a really beautiful opportunity to be part of that and have that experience for young audiences there. Look, there's been other things that through my time at the Australia Council, I was so privileged and so fortunate to work with artists all around Australia and get to see a lot of that work too, which was really, really fortunate and really, really lucky. I'll never forget that as one of the most amazing periods of my career, I guess, of having that chance to sort of get that national overview of, and I guess on that as a bit of a segue, should anyone ever get the chance to be a peer assessor for a funding, agency, be it Creative New Zealand or any other jurisdiction, do it, because the chance that you get to sort of be part of those conversations and see who's doing what in various parts of your sector nationally and indeed internationally is a really, really exceptional opportunity. And then likewise the conversations that you have during the assessment meetings as well are really, really exciting to be part of. So that's a bit of a segue, but I always give that a plug because it's something that as a personal and career development opportunity can't be underestimated. So but yeah, look, I mean, I saw so many amazing performances and works during that period. One that will stick with me for a very long time, that again I was fortunate to have a cameo in, was a piece by two amazing artists called Nat Randall and Anna Brecken, called The Second Woman. And it was a 24-hour work, which the same scene was repeated each time with a different male character. And so I was the male character in one of those scenes. It was here in Perth, actually, for the Perth Festival. and it's based on a movie with the name of which I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was a really beautiful and powerful work. And so as a male performer, you were given a script to learn, and then, like I said, Nat stayed in that space for 24 hours, and it was sort of live filmed and live captioned for the audience that were in the auditorium, and just did that same scene on loop for 24 hours straight. And just seeing the different dynamics that each male brought to that work was really exceptional. And as I said, a real blessing to have both been in the work and then also having the chance to sit and watch it. I think the performance started, I think, at 8 p.m. My slot was at 11:30 p.m. and then I think I was able to go back in and watch as an audience member until about 4 o'clock in the morning. It was so captivating and engrossing. It was really, really, really amazing. And then I think someone who else I've loved watching perform on many occasions is someone else who you've had as part of this series is the wonderful Josh Pether. As well. His work is truly, truly exceptional. I saw one of the most memorable works was a piece that he did for the Yirumboy Festival several years ago in Melbourne. Yeah, just the way he can traverse contemporary and experimental performance, and I've seen him more recently in theatrical work. His versatility as a performer and artist is amazing. So I could go on and on and on, just feel a whole day talking about things that I've seen. I want to see you one day, Rodney. God, I've never seen you live, but I've seen imagery and video of your work, and I can't wait to have the opportunity to see some of your performance work at some stage.
Yeah, kia ora, Jeremy. I hope I'm at my best at the time.
Can we just have a swap of interpreters, please? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Hey, at Touch Compass, in this moment in time, we really are moving forward around this disability leadership space, but also around the self-care and well-being space. And it's quite important for us. And so what that entails is what's going on at home for us, and what's going on with our bodies, and so intertwining that with work, so that we're turning up at work with not only with respect, but also in a productive sense, so that, you know, and we can call that crip time, or, you know, but we call it a collective time as well, because we do have different bodies working within Touch Compass Dance Trust. And so we have that leadership and that management space, and they have different needs and accesses. And I understand management space needs to keep the business driving, the organization driving forward. And then that leadership space deals with all the cultural and the intertwining of people, and ensuring that everyone's being heard and so forth. And I'm just wondering, what's that importance with you, Jeremy, like when you are getting hired by a new organization, or desire to work with a new organization, or new employers, and how important is that home space for you to be intertwined into your workspace?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I think I'm so lucky that Performing Lines has a really flexible approach to work. You know, I think we're a very small team in Western Australia, where essentially we're a team of 4, but you know, the full-time equivalent of us is 3. So I'm the only full-timer, and the other 3 colleagues of mine are part-time. And you know, we've got a really, again, it's one of those gifts of the pandemic, I think, where people have realized that you don't physically need to go to an office to do your work. You can sort of work from home and still be online, and still be, you know, reachable and whatnot as well. And I think we've, you know, Performing Lines in WA have really found a good niche of that, that how we sort of collaborate and work together, where there's 2 days a week where we all are physically in the office together, which are Wednesdays and Thursdays. And then the rest of the time is quite flexible, where those that are working would sort of work from home. Like I said in my previous response, I'm always never really been a fan of working from home, and that's very personal. And I have no, I've always sort of liked to have a clear delineation between what is my home and what is my workplace. And I prefer a lot more the routine of going to a workplace and an office and sort of working and doing things that way. Even, you know, if I chose to work on a weekend, I would prefer to go to the office than I would to sort of do work from home. I've always been a strange fellow in that sense, because I'm you know, when I was a lighting designer, I was very tactile. And one of the reasons I left lighting design actually was because I hand drew all my designs. I never used any computer aided drafting programs. But then also loved the process of selecting gels, and I never liked using robotic or smart lights. So I think that is sort of instilled in a lot of the ways that I sort of go about my work and whatnot. But getting back to your point is, I agree. I think the fact of needing to maintain self-care is something that we all need to, again, be one of those legacies that we hold on to as we exit the pandemic, because I think we've all realized that things do change, and they change because of no fault of our own, but we then need to sort of take the time to sort of navigate our way through the impact of those changes and those shifting sands. And I think that whole concept of what is, you know, you call it quip time, I think slow time as well, is really something that we need to be very cognizant of in terms of how we can sort of maintain, you know, a balance and an approach to the way that we work. You know, like I said, I mean, I've only identified as a disabled person since the age of 39, 5 years ago. And there's been a really big shift in the way that I've then thought about my own physicality and the support that I've personally needed to sort of get, you know, embracing physiotherapy and all those sorts of things in order to keep my body functional and working, and trying to keep myself as healthy and fit for work and life as possible. Yeah, I think yeah, it's something I hope that we will continue to sort of remember and keep at the center of our approach of to our work as we move forward.
So Jeremy, what inspired you to shift your identity to identifying with disability culture?
It's a really lovely story, actually. So I moved to Sydney to take up the job at the Australia Council in April 2016, and in late 2015, I had a very dear friend of mine, Marnie Richardson, who lives here with me in Boorloo and I've known for many years. She's a producer and works a lot in media and radio. She and a couple of colleagues were asked by Perth Festival to be part of a project that was part of the Empathy Museum, which is an organisation based in the UK, and Centre for Stories, which is a wonderful little organisation here in Perth, called A Mile in My Shoes. And A Mile in My Shoes is essentially an empathy shoebox, which gets installed in a public location. I'm pretty sure it's been to New Zealand at some stage, Aotearoa, and I think certainly it's been to other places in Australia.
Yeah.
And basically the way that the model works is that they collect stories from local people of, you know, themselves or a significant moment of their life. And so my dear friend Marnie approached me and asked me to talk about being me, being a person with achondroplasia, and how, you know, some of the ways that I was treated and some of the things that I'd been subjected to, both good and bad, as a child and as an adult at that stage. And that was the first time anyone had asked me to tell that side of my identity and that side of my story. And it was the first time I sat with my parents and asked them what it was like as, you know, when I was born and then as a child. And the first time I'd had quite a robust conversation with many of my peers and friends about it, ahead of then recording my story. And I think that was the moment. So when I started realizing that this is a pretty significant part of me, and, you know, having that whole chance to reflect on everything that was, I guess I just sort of said, oh, it's just, I've got to do it that way because I've just got to do it that way. I'd never acknowledged and appreciated the fact that it was because I am indeed a disabled man, and I am indeed needing to adapt every day of my life to sort of suit what society's perception of normal or average is. So yeah, so as a result of that, and then having people, so essentially the work becomes a 10 to 12 minute podcast of me telling my story, and many others. I think there were about 35 stories altogether. So essentially you go into this giant shoebox and you're given a pair of shoebox in return, and in that is a pair of shoes. So I had a pair of jandals and an MP3 player. And so you literally take off your own shoes, put on the shoes of that person, and then listen, walk around the park listening. So essentially walking a mile in someone else's shoes. And so then hearing the stories of and seeing the written feedback to people that had listened to my story was really, really touching and really, really, I guess, significant. And then realizing at that point that, you know, that's when I started embracing and owning that part of my identity. And as I said, regret having not done it until the age of 39. Yeah. So art, really, I mean, that says everything, doesn't it? It was sort of.
It's a lovely story, Jeremy.
Thank you, Lucy.
And did it change your work? The kind of work that you chose?
It actually brought me back to you know, because I'd sort of spent a period of time outside of the art sector for about 5 years. And that at that moment was then when I started sort of reconnecting, you know, with, you know, I think given that that was such a significant moment for me, thanks to the arts, in many ways, it brought me back, which was really lucky, because I can't imagine not being back in this sector now. So yeah, it was so significant on many levels. And I'll be forever grateful for the festival for asking me to be a part of that. Wendy Martin, who was the artistic director at that stage, and of course my friend Marnie for inviting me to tell my story. I think that for forever will be a tipping point for me, I think. And the podcast is still online with the Centre for Stories, and I think in the Empathy Museum as well. So people are still hear it from various collections and everything, and they track me down and give me feedback about it. So it's you know, it's one of those things where it's really some, you know, really awful sides of being disabled, but also some very good sides as well.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. Sorry, go ahead, Rodney.
Oh, Jeremy, who and what is your inspiration that keeps you going on your artistic journey?
Oh, I think I'm just going to, you know, artists and their ideas every day. That's what I sort of, you know, having conversations. That's one thing, I guess, you know, I mean, yes, we can still have conversations like this, but actually coming together and seeing work and sharing stories and having that opportunity to riff off one another. And that's why moments like these, I sort of try to steer away, as I said, when you approach me, of just having a talking head. I much prefer opportunities to have a dialogue and a conversation that you can sort of just riff off one another. And so that I always find that as a really amazing thing when you're in a room, in a space with artists, and having that chance to talk about ideas and talk about what impacts the decision-making processes behind your work, and what what inspires you, what gives you the shits, pardon my French, all that sort of thing, and how that feeds the creative process is something that really, I guess, gets me up at night. I think within disabled artists, I love the way that their bravery, that they sort of explore new genres of practice, new aesthetics within their practice, that they're more and more really striving to develop works of scale, which I think we need more of. I think, as I said before, I'm a very visual and tactile person, so I'm very image based as well. So I take a lot of pleasure of, flipping through magazines and art books and everything like that to sort of get ideas and inspo. And I also love collaborations, like trying to get people together in a safe and meaningful way that normally probably wouldn't consider themselves as accomplices or allies, to collaborate and make new work as well.
Yeah, kia ora, Jeremy. Hey, I just like, for me, I think about how we enhance our future. How do we enhance our young ones coming up in relationship to be inspired to be artists and to be mentors for them. And I thought to myself, wow, because for me, I was like sort of colonized by conditioning, more in an education, whatever it may have been. But it's sort of what I felt I missed out on is these gifts of kindness, the arts, learning more awareness around what disabled community is and so forth like that. And I'm just wondering, how do you see yourself giving back to our future artists or wannabe artists?
Yeah, I never take for granted the privilege that I've got. I think where I've been very lucky, where in terms of the opportunity that I've been given, and the sort of jobs that I've been able to get, and the people I've been able to work with, and so I'm very cautious and cognizant of having to pay it forward. And be available to, be it as a mentor, be it as a board member, be it as a peer assessor, and to just be generally involved within the sector, to give back, because I know it's a sector that has given me so much. That comes with its complications in terms of already having a very busy day job and whatnot, but and I think also the fact of just being a patron as well, and seeing the work and being there to support other artists is really significant and really important too. I've chosen to work and live in a very certain way, in that I'm a single man. I've got no children, so I can afford the time to be able to do things out of working hours, to give back in some way. So people have been very generous to me, and I hope that I can sort of be generous to other people the way that I've experienced as well. Yeah.
You could have an interpreter swap, please. Okay, good to go. Thank you.
Hey, Jeremy, just on top of that, what would be your ideal educational system? You could change something at school around education.
I've always, again, I've said it several times, but it's I am very practical, tactile, and visual. I've never worked well in training, and me have never sat well together. I don't know why, but yeah, it's never been something where I'm not a good student, but I do learn really well on the job. It's terrible at study, terrible exams, and all that sort of thing. But the thing that I give the example of quite often is a couple of subjects in maths. I was terrible at maths. I'm the son of a bank manager. Excelled at all the humanities and everything, but terrible at maths. However, I studied accounting in year 8, 9, and 10, which is our early years of high school here in Australia. And I was almost top of the class in accounting, but bottom of the class in maths. So it's more of a practical application that I was very good at. And thank God I'm a producer now because I can learn how to do a budget. But again, there were other units in maths there was this unit that we did called maths in sport. And again, I really was amazing at that because it was all about the scoring and umpiring systems and everything like that. But give me a Pythagoras theory and gone. So I think, and like I said, I mean, I really enjoyed the process of tech drawing for all my lighting design plans, but then was quite bad at the more, physics type elements of lighting around electronics and everything like that. So that's the thing. I think every person has very unique ways of learning and very unique ways of self-training. And I think there always needs to be adaptation and flex and accommodation to the unique circumstances of each person in a learning environment. And I guess that's something that far often than not, it just seems to be a one-size-fits-all approach, which really divides and conquers a lot of people's learning journey, which I think is sad because, like I said, I mean, from a purely academic perspective, I was never great, but in other aspects, I really was able to excel, but they were probably not the subjects or the areas of learning that were as valued by a traditional education system.
Yeah, kia ora, Jeremy. I feel like our government should inject more money.
And I can relate with your training and learning.
Oh, kia ora, Lucy. Yeah, I feel if the government could invest a lot more money into education, we'll have a much brighter future, right? We'll have that flexibility.
Yeah.
And our teachers will be enhanced because I feel like teachers are so underrated.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's extraordinary. I mean, I still remember some of my teachers as the ones that got the fact that I was learning differently and that sort of time and effort to sort of try and change and accommodate and did what they could to sort of break the mold, which obviously under incredible duress and stress, given, it's the education system's a bit of a behemoth at the best of times.
Yeah. And disability culture should be taught at a young age as well.
Absolutely.
And I reckon through the arts.
Yeah.
It should be part of the arts component, not this thing over here.
Just the whole thing. I mean, the concept of difference, really. I mean, in all its forms and permeations through life. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. Kia ora. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.
My team. Do we have any other fired up questions we want to ask, Jeremy?
So Lucy's asked another question, sorry.
Oh,
you wanted to perform or work behind the scenes? Oh. You're cheeky, Lucy. No, as I said, I never, it's very strange. I've never pursued performance work. A few things have fallen in my lap. By chance, which I've just thought, oh yeah, I'll give it a go. But I've always been much more at home in behind the scenes. It's strange though, because it's sort of more and more I get asked to do speaking engagements like this. And, I think people want to see me do a podcast one day or something like that, but I don't know if it'd be it'd be quite a boring podcast. Chewing the fat with Jazz. I don't know if how well that'll go down.
Hey Jeremy, we're just about to sort of wrap up this session before we go into we've got like a couple of minutes wrap up, but is there anything that you'd like to let us know, not only as fellow artists, but as an Aotearoa community, artistic community. Is there any sort of burning desire for us to know something, or
Yeah.
and can you enlighten us with your light?
Good grief. I think let's all collectively make sure we don't get left behind as we exit the pandemic, I think, and hold firm, hold fast, and make sure we take the space, we take the time, we ensure others flex to us rather than the other way around, and be brave. And I think, you know, Australia and Aotearoa need to collaborate more. It's funny, when I was at the Australia Council, there was a lot of outward focus on regions further afar, say North America, Europe, North Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia. And I think we're neighbours, and I think there's so much that we could sort of explore and collaborate on together. So I hope that as we move forward, given our closeness and our proximity and our bloody great artists, I think more and more between Aotearoa and Australia, let's do it.
Thanks, Jeremy. And I'd just like to honour something that's brought us together this day, and that's the Touch Compass Dance Trust Office. We have JT, we have Izzy, we have Lish, and we have Zan. And those are the ones like yourself that sit in the background and you know, ensure that we are living the life as artists, that we're empowered to be present, but also making sure that we cope with all good things.
Yeah, I think you guys have got such an amazing model and an incredible track record, and I'm so lucky to have been, you know, I knew you, Rodney, obviously, but now knowing the rest of you, looking forward to sort of continuing this relationship beyond today. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
We're just going to welcome back our cloaker, Izzy.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, and Rodney. Thank you for those very kind words for the office staff. We appreciate that. We do have quite a few questions that have come in via the chat. So I'll start with reading some of them aloud. COVID-19 has tested the preparedness of most arts and creative professionals. How well did WA creatives cope with that myriad of challenges, and what surprised you about the resilience in the sector?
Well, it's been, it's a very strange situation here, as I said before, because we've been relatively lucky and unscathed by the pandemic. And so we've had a couple of sort of little glitches and lockdowns. I mean, one of the biggest sort of feats, I think, which came about in early 2021, we did have a snap lockdown in February, right on the eve of our Perth festival. And the whole sector, led by the festival, and lifted and shifted that entire festival. So rather than cancelling it, to new dates so that the whole festival could continue unscathed. And few parts of the world have been able to do that. I think most festivals have been cancelled, but this was an extraordinary feat that was really due to the work of a few key staff at the festival, but then also the entire sector of getting behind them and supporting that move, which was huge, to sort of shift back a festival by, I think it was 10 days, and then just completely reschedule it and deliver it. It was extraordinary to do that. And I think one of the things that I worry about now coming, you know, when we're sort of at the end of this, you know, there's been a roadmap announced by our state government out of COVID. There will be elements of restrictions reintroduced where we've been, you know, quite restriction free for the last 6 months or so. So I guess how the sector then sort of adapts and responds to that, because I think the arts will be one of the obviously hardest hit facets of our community when we do reopen and when those restrictions are imposed. You know, we've become a bit complacent over here because COVID hasn't been a thing that we've had to live with. So people are forgetting to do the QR check-in codes and whatnot. So I think how that all comes back into front of mind as we reopen and will be a really big thing. But I think the sector here, as I said, we've been open and delivering and producing and programming, and I think we're all just knackered because of that thing where it's just been ourselves and we haven't sort of had the same change of people coming in from other states and territories. So yeah, we've been lucky, but I think we've got a bit of a road ahead of us now as we sort of exit out of the current island within an island, as we call ourselves in WA at the moment.
And I think that feeling of knackeredness is pretty global at the moment, Jeremy, and especially in the art sector.
Yeah.
So another question here is about getting into producing or getting into production. So a lot of entry-level production jobs ends with the phrase, must be able to lift 20 kilos, must be able to climb a ladder. What advice or guidance or information would you give a young disabled creative who's looking to get into production, get into set building, lighting design, or even stage management?
Yeah, look, I mean, I went through WAPA, and part of the entry process there was having a face-to-face interview as well as doing a written entry statement. And I remember when I went into the interview, they said, "Oh, can you climb a ladder?" And so I had to physically walk into a studio and show them that I could physically climb a ladder. So I think it's just knowing that there are really horrific perceptions there that will act as a barrier, but then I think it's just having the personal resilience to show that there are ways to adapt and flex and overcome those in ways that still enable you to do the work. You know, I think there were moments where I was you know, faced with challenges. I mean, you know, the whole concept of lighting in the sort of technical side of it is getting up ladders and rigging things, and so there were moments where I just physically could not do that work. But I was still able to be a great lighting designer, so says I, and able to do that. So I think it's about ensuring you get past any of those initial gatekeepers and having the conversation to sort of say, well, let's see how we can actually make this work, because I think there is always a way. And particularly if there is the will there, that there would be opportunities to for organisations, training institutions and venues to adapt. And I think now sort of a pivotal time of that too, given the changes that have already had to been put in place as a result of the pandemic. I hope that sort of answers the question.
I think so, yeah. There's a wonderful follow-up here from Katie. Have you encountered resistance in any of your work of organizations being hesitant to designate resources to art accessibility? If yes, how do you work around the fear or misunderstandings people have to positively encourage them to put effort into creating accessible art spaces rather than resorting to guilt or other tactics? And by guilt, I mean pointing out that not creating accessible spaces is truly not acceptable anymore.
Whew, I have faced barriers, yes, absolutely. And it was strange, you know, I guess because I didn't identify as disabled till quite late, I was probably maybe sometimes complicit in those attitudes, because I sort of felt I didn't have the right at that stage to request things be adapted for me or modified for me, or that I could demand that changes be made to accommodate my needs and my sort of circumstances. You know, and I have experienced, you know, institutional discrimination and a bias and whatnot, absolutely. I think that more and more, I just probably don't have time for that. And so I sort of call it out and sort of put the onus back onto those organizations to like it or lump it. And then, you know, I think I think that's, you know, I'm sort of probably becoming a grumpy old man in some aspects now, and just sort of saying I really don't have time or space in my life to put up with that. And just particularly when I see it happening to others, I sort of figure that one of the best things I can do is be an ally. You know, and there's ways of dealing with things like that, both behind scenes and as well as, you know, doing it in a way that is productive as well, and not always being sort of aggressive or I guess confrontational too. Sorry, I know there were a few elements to that question. I hope I've sort of covered a few of them. I see your face there, Katie. Yeah? Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, amazing. So another question that's popped up in the chat, it's come directly to me, is being a production professional and a governor board member, what skill set do you feel translates across both of those that makes arts governments unique from other governing boards?
Look, I think there's a tendency for too many arts organizations to, be skills-based. So I bring a lot of corporate expertise, and absolutely there's a need for strong governance in terms of finance and business acumen and whatnot. But then I think the voice of the artist or arts worker at that level can often be lost. And so I think how to sort of get that blend is really important. Obviously I work in more of a arts manager, producer, production element of the sector. So I don't identify myself as an artist and therefore replacing the voice of an artist at board level. So I think the sort of expertise and perspective that I would bring on board level is about that more, support and ally to the general manager or executive director or producer of those companies, just to be able to support them and help them through whatever, is required at board level and at a governance level. Obviously, from my role on the chamber, I feel a certain perspective from an advocacy viewpoint for what sort of producers and arts managers need through my own sort of work and whatnot too. So I guess it's that sort of context of, but then also my whole career. I mean, I've been at various levels in various jobs, and I sort of bring funding expertise for having worked in arts funding agencies as well onto boards. And it's, I think boards are good. I think it's important for people to understand what they're getting in for as being a director of a company, because there are certain, obviously, legal obligations. It's not just sort of there to be seen, it's there to actually have a responsibility and accountability, and having an understanding of that before signing up to be a director is really important, I think. And then also knowing that you can do so and give it the time and attention that it needs, because it's not just turning up for meetings. There is often requirements as a director of a board to have sort of support the work of that organization in other ways beyond the time and period of board meetings.
Thank you for that answer. And I think we've got time for one more question from the chat, and then I'll hand it back over to the ADP for final words and final closing words from you, Jeremy. And so last question from the chat is simply, we do not have enough producers with lived experience of disability. How do we get more?
That's a very good question, and something I ask myself every day at the moment here in WA as well. Yeah, look, it's a very, I think it's a pandemic of its own variant, I think, because yeah, there is a huge shortage of producers generally, let alone of lived experience of certain areas of our society. And I think, that whole burden of self-producing artists and sort of, that was the reason that the organization I work with was created, to sort of support artists that don't have the infrastructure of an organization around them to sort of alleviate a lot of that stress of funding and reporting and presentation and whatnot too. So I just think, again, it comes down to pathways. It comes down to, I guess, how companies and organizations prioritize what roles they have within their structures in terms of how they divvy up and make space for opportunity as well. And I think it's also about people in roles making space and sort of really thinking if it's time for someone else to have a turn, have opportunity for someone else to have a go, and again, up to the individual. I mean, I don't see myself as gatekeeping this role for a very long time. I much believe in setting up others for success, and so I think that there'll come a time where I need to make space for someone else, hopefully of lived experience of, be it someone from a different culturally diverse background or a First Nations Australian or another disabled person, to step into this role when the time's right. And I think that's something that a lot of people really don't probably have as a factor in their thinking and decision making.
We have a swap of interpreters, please.
Finishing on a controversial note there, maybe.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for all your wisdom that you've shared today. And thank you so much to our ADP for helping guide that. Katie just popped in the chat. I love the concept of gatekeeping roles rather than owning them. I think it's a really interesting perspective for those of us in similar positions, Jeremy, of what is the legacy, who's going to be the next person to gatekeep that role for a short time. And so if there were any last burning thoughts or questions, we've just got a few more minutes and then we'll close it up. Okay, well, brilliant. Well, beg your pardon, please.
I was going to say, what's next for Touch Compass? Final series. Give yourselves a plug.
Show in February.
Hey!
Taha.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Ritaha was our own shifted festival that was meant to happen in September.
Oh, amazing.
And then it was meant to happen in November. And now it's meant to happen in February. So it will be one of Aotearoa's first completely disability-led, completely accessible performing arts festival, featuring some of our dearest and brightest. So yes, we're really looking forward to that. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us and for rounding out our series. It's been such a joy to hear you speak and to hear about your journey and really a highlight to end on. So thank you again. And everyone who's tuned in, thank you so much for watching and thanks for tuning in. And if you'd like to see a copy of this, it usually takes us a couple of days, but then we'll be posting it on our social media or possibly on our YouTube, depending on where it ends up going. And we'll be posting that. And if you have any questions or concerns for the Touch Compass team, you can reach me directly at producer@touchcompass.org.nz, and I'll be able to answer any questions you have. Lucy, was there something you wanted to add?
Thanks, Jeremy. It has a great talk with you today's webinar and hope we all can have more opportunities to talk in the future.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Rodney. Thank you, Izzy. Thank you, JT. Thank you, everyone. It's been really lovely. As I said, I was very humbled to have been asked to speak with you all today. So thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity in time and space. Thank you.
Welcome, Jeremy.
And to close us out, I'll pass us back over to JT, who will lead us in a closing karakia.
Kia ora, Izzy, thank you. Whakawhatai kia koe mo te kōrero rero I o tēnei rā e Jeremy. Thanks so much for your conversation and your words today. I'll just wrap us up with a closing karakia in honour of our Indigenous nations. Kia whakaria te tapu, kia watea ai te ara, kia tūriki whakataa ai, kia tūriki whakataa ai, haumi e, hui e, tāi ki e. Essentially, restrictions are now moved aside. We can return to our everyday lives, forward together, connected together, allied, brought together, and as one. Kia ora.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.